the flavor that split a nation. Some dishes delight, others comfort. But once in a rare moment, a single flavor appears that does something far more powerful. It divides an entire nation. This is the story of a dish so bold, so unapologetically different, that it ignited debates in living rooms, on television, in parliament halls, and across millions of dinner tables. A flavor that became a cultural fault line. It all began in a small regional restaurant known only to locals, a humble place where the chef cooked from instinct rather than ambition. He had no desire for fame. He simply chased the flavors that lived in his memory, shaped by the land that raised him. One day, while experimenting with ingredients native to the region, he stumbled upon a combination so strange, so intense, that it startled even him. It carried the earthiness of the countryside, the fire of its storms, and a bitterness that lingered like a truth people tried not to face. When he served it to a few regulars, their reactions were immediate and extreme. Some fell in love, calling it the most authentic taste they had ever experienced. Others recoiled, insisting it was an insult to their culinary heritage. The chef had unintentionally touched something raw, something deeper than preference, a memory, a wound, a pride. In the weeks that followed, the dish spread far beyond the restaurant's walls. Food bloggers called it unforgettable. Critics called it provocative, but ordinary people called it something far more personal. Theirs. It tasted like the land they grew up on, its struggles, its beauty, its contradictions. Some embraced that complexity, others refused it, and slowly, a flavor became a symbol. To understand how this happened, we must return to the cultural landscape of the nation at that moment. It was a country divided, urban against rural, tradition against progress, nostalgia against reinvention. People longed for identity, for belonging, for a sense of who they were in a world changing too fast. And the dish, with its bold and challenging taste, forced every diner confront that question whether they wanted to or not. As word spread, journalists arrived. Television crews followed. Politicians took sides. Cooking competitions were disrupted by arguments over authenticity. Families sat around dinner tables debating whether the flavor honored their history or betrayed it. The chef watched all of this unfold with disbelief. He had created a dish, not a movement, a flavor, not a battlefield. And yet, the story was no longer his to control. Something powerful had been awakened, something the country had carried for generations, now rising to the surface through a single, unforgettable taste. And soon, the first sparks of conflict would ignite. As the dish spread beyond its humble origins, reactions intensified with startling speed. Restaurants across the country added their own versions, some honoring the original, others twisting it into extremes. Food journalists traveled to the region where it was born, tracing its ingredients, interviewing farmers, probing for meaning. They spoke of culinary identity and national consciousness, as if the dish were a manifesto rather than a meal. But with each new article, each televised debate, the divide sharpened. Supporters claimed the flavor represented the soul of the nation, unpolished, resilient, honest. They said it carried the story of their ancestors, the hardships of the land, the integrity of traditions held through generations. To them, the dish wasn't just food. It was pride. Opponents argued just as fiercely. They saw the flavor as an anchor holding the country back, a symbol of old wounds and outdated thinking. They rejected its bitterness, its intensity, its refusal to conform to modern palates. Urban diners dismissed it as rustic nostalgia. Influencers mocked it as an acquired taste nobody asked for. Some chefs refused to serve it, calling it a step in the wrong direction. The clash grew louder, more emotional, echoing far beyond the kitchens where the dish was made. Restaurants reported heated arguments between guests. Families found themselves split during Sunday dinners. In small towns, the dish became a point of local pride. In big cities, a spark for cultural commentary. Hashtags trended. Memes circulated. Food critics engaged in passionate exchanges that bordered on poetic fury. Meanwhile, the chef who created the dish withdrew from the spotlight. He never intended to become a national symbol or a national controversy. He cooked to express the land he came from, not to provoke division. Yet everywhere he looked, People projected their identities, fears, and aspirations onto a flavor he once discovered in solitude. The pressure around him intensified when prestigious Culinary Award Committee announced that the dish was under consideration for national recognition. This ignited fresh outrage. Protesters gathered outside the committee's headquarters, arguing that elevating such a polarizing dish would deepen the country's cultural divide. Supporters rallied at the same spot, demanding the dish receive the honor they believed it deserved. Suddenly, the chef was invited to speak on television, to explain himself, to choose a side. But he refused every invitation, leaving the nation to interpret his silence in their own way. Some saw dignity, others saw cowardice. Inside his small restaurant, the atmosphere grew heavy. Loyal regulars filled the seats, but their conversations now buzzed with tension. The chef felt every gaze, every expectation. The flavor he created was no longer just a taste. It was a battleground, and as the award ceremony approached, the country braced for a decision that would either heal or inflame the simmering conflict. The dish had become a symbol of everything the nation struggled to reconcile, and the moment of reckoning was drawing near. As the award ceremony approached, the nation's obsession with the dish reached a fever pitch. News anchors discussed it nightly, framing it as a cultural referendum disguised as cuisine. Editorials dissected the meaning of its bitterness. Radio hosts opened phone lines to heated callers arguing about whether the dish represented national pride or national stagnation. Everywhere the chef turned, he saw a flavor transformed into a fault line. Inside his restaurant, tension seeped into the walls. Reservations were overrun with people wanting to taste the dish at the center of the storm. Some arrived with reverence. Others came prepared to scoff. A few arrived armed with outrage, determined to confront the chef directly. The staff stood guard, protective, anxious, fiercely loyal. But beneath the chaos, a deeper conflict was unfolding inside the chef himself. He had created the dish as a tribute to his homeland, a reflection of its harshness and beauty, its resilience and contradictions. But now it felt as though the nation had torn that reflection into pieces, twisting it into an emblem for battles he never intended to provoke. The weight of expectation pressed on him from every direction. If the dish won the award, people would claim victory. If it lost, people would claim defeat. Either way, the flavor would become a weapon in arguments far removed from the kitchen where it was born. One night, unable to sleep, the chef stood alone in the silent dining room. He gazed at the empty tables, imagining the countless conversations his dish had sparked, some tender, some furious, some heartbreakingly honest. He wondered whether a flavor could carry so much meaning without collapsing under the burden. He wondered whether he himself could. Then a letter arrived. It came from a rural school in the region where he grew up. A teacher wrote that she had served the dish during a cultural lesson. The children, many of whom had never tasted it before, responded with excitement and curiosity rather than division. They asked questions about their heritage. They shared stories from their families. They debated its taste with laughter rather than judgment. The dish in their hands became what he had always intended, a conversation, not a conflict. The letter shook something loose inside him. Perhaps the nation had split not because of the flavor itself, but because of the truths it forced people to confront. Truths about identity, belonging, and how a country remembers its past. Perhaps division was not failure, but a sign that people cared deeply enough to feel provoked. And perhaps, just perhaps, the dish's purpose wasn't to unite the nation, but to reveal it to itself. The night before the award ceremony, the chef gathered his staff. He told them that the outcome mattered far less than what the dish had already accomplished. It had sparked reflection, challenged assumptions, and brought hidden tensions to the surface. It had made people talk. It had made people feel. And in a time when apathy threatened to dull the nation, making people feel was no small victory. The next day, as the ceremony began and the country held its breath, the chef walked into the hall not as a symbol of division, but as a witness to the power of flavor. To reveal, to provoke, to heal. What happened next would send shockwaves across the nation. The ceremony unfolded beneath the glow of stage lights. Cameras trained on every gesture. Politicians, critics, celebrities, farmers, and food scholars filled the auditorium, each carrying expectations shaped by months of debate. The award committee announced that, for the first time in its history, the winner of the nation's highest culinary honor would be determined by both expert evaluation and public vote. The atmosphere pulsed with anticipation. When the dish's name was read among the final contenders, a wave of murmurs rippled through the hall. Some applauded with fervor. Others folded their arms, bracing for disappointment. The chef sat quietly in the back row, his hands folded in his lap. He felt neither pride nor fear, only a strange, calm clarity. Whatever the outcome, the dish had already lived a life far beyond anything he imagined. Then came the moment. The National Award for Culinary Contribution. The announcer said, goes to... A pause. A breath held by millions watching at home. The flavor that has sparked conversation across our country. Not because we all agree on it, but because it made us talk at all. They named his dish. The hall erupted. Not into uniform applause, but into a thunderstorm of conflicting reactions. Cheers, gasps, applause, protests, even tears. Cameras swung toward the chef, capturing the stunned, humbled expression on his face as the room fractured into emotion. Some attendees rose in passionate support. Others stormed out. The nation, watching live, split along the fault lines that had shaped the debate for months. Yet, amid the pandemonium, something remarkable happened. A quiet group of elders from the chef's rural hometown stepped onto the stage uninvited. They placed their hands on his shoulders and stood beside him, not as political symbols, but as living threads of the tradition he had woven into the dish. Their presence softened the room. Cameras lowered. The crowd fell into an uneasy stillness. It was no longer a moment about victory or loss. It was about origin, about history, about the land that shaped them all. The chef spoke only a few words. This dish was never meant to divide us. It was meant to remind us of where we come from and how far we've yet to go. His voice carried to the hall, steady and unadorned. A silence followed, deeper than the applause that eventually rose behind it. In the days that followed, the nation reacted in waves. Some celebrated the decision as a triumph of authenticity. Others condemned it as an embrace of outdated values. Television programs hosted debates that lasted hours. Social media swelled with commentary. Yet beneath the noise, something quieter began to settle, a recognition that the dish had forced the country to look at itself with unusual honesty. Restaurants across the region hosted community meals where supporters and opponents sat together, sharing stories rather than arguments. Schools used the dish to teach history not as a pristine narrative, but as a tapestry of conflicting perspectives. Families once divided by taste found themselves laughing again at the absurdity of letting a flavor turn them into opponents. The chef returned to his restaurant, where regulars greeted him not as a national figure, but as the humble man they had always known. He stepped into his kitchen, picked up his tools, and continued cooking, not to please the nation, but to stay connected to the truth that started it all. And he understood then that the dish had done something profound. It had not unified the nation. It had revealed it. It had not resolved the past. It had illuminated it. It had not silenced disagreement. It had transformed it into conversation. Some flavors comfort, some delight, and some rare, powerful, unforgettable teach us who we are. So what do you think? Are we repeating the same mistake again?